Hey Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation, and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform. You get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Peter Flores, who does partnership at Vice Media. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Pretty excited.
Oh, come on. We excited over here. We definitely want to know what's going on at Vice Media. That's a big company right there. Definitely big things going on over there. But before we dive into what you do now currently at Vice Media, we definitely want to know a little bit about the background. We got to start from the bottom up. I want to know a little bit about where you're from, some of your upbringing. So where you're from?
Yeah. So I think I got an interesting upbringing only because there's a juxtaposition to it. I grew up basically in the tri-state area, mostly New York City and North Jersey. I've pretty much in my formative years grew up 15 minutes away from Washington Square Park in all directions. So that kind of feels like the center of my life. I always think about it as home. Whenever I step around the Washington Square Park area, it just kind of feels like where I'm from. Yeah, that's kind of where the essence of myself and the genesis of who I ended up becoming.
Okay. And what's your cultural background?
Sure. So I'm a Mexican and Puerto Rican. I'm first generation on the Mexican side. My mom came to the U.S. In the early 1970s. My dad was born and raised in New York City in Spanish Harlem, but his parents were born in Puerto Rico. So I got that Latin flavor from both sides.
Shout out to the Latin flavor. What's some of the things that you appreciate about both cultures?
Oh man, see, what's interesting about the upbringing too, and I want to be transparent because I think that's going to add to the story is. While my dad was involved in my life in the sense of like he wasn't an absentee dad, he was around anytime I needed him. I only lived with my mom and spent most of my time with my mom. So the Mexican side of things really kind of was something that really stuck with me all throughout kind of my upbringing. I went to Mexico every year, every summer growing up. And at this, just to give you an idea, at this moment, I still have never been to Puerto Rico. Shout out to Puerto Rico. Guys,
okay, shout out to Puerto Rico.
Yes, I could still dance. I just haven't been on the soil yet, but it's something that I'm planning to do. But either way, my dad was really involved still. But inside the home, right? It was a real Mexican upbringing and kind of those values and something, an important thing to realize having a Mexican mom, first generation, and then my grandma being, the woman that kind of was with me all the time when my mom was working is religion and soap operas, man. They'll do a lot to you. Religion and Mexican soap operas will create some sort of direction in your life. But it's cool. That's where I learned, I had my dad speaking to me in English, my mom and grandmother speaking to me only in Spanish. I grew up with that kind of dual language situation, and for better, for worse, for better, really, it challenged my brain to think, on both sides of the game, and it pretty much prepared me to be dual language.
Okay, I'm loving this story already, right? I like how it's unfolded. Now, you mentioned a lot about your mother, by living with your mom and the upbringing, the Mexican culture. What are some of the qualities that were instilled in you at a young age from the Mexican culture?
Yeah, I think, I think an important piece to think about here about the Mexican culture is I don't want to call to the attention the fact that there was like this hard work instilled in me, because I feel like that is universal across, immigrant cultures and first generation, but more so than anything, it was a hard work ethic, kind of like, idea where it had to come from your hard work needed to be something that was going to end up having a legacy, right? That's something that my
Mm,
mother instilled in
mm,
me. Not only a legacy, right? But she was like, the one thing that I want you to end up leaving this world with is if you are able to have a conversation with anybody in the world, then you've won, right? And what she meant by it is like, there's got to be some way for you to be able to connect with every single person on the planet if possible. You know, if you go on a trip to France and you're in a random street, you're able to connect with that person. If you're touring, some government place, in a random part of the United States, you got to be able to just be able to talk enough and feel like that you have the confidence enough to be in a conversation. Those are one of the things that I don't know if that really, comes from the Mexican side, but it definitely came from my mom herself. And
mm,
I'm glad that I'm here talking with you guys, because maybe it's something that I go back and, you're always trying to figure out what to talk to your parents about. And this could be something cool for me to go back and say, hey, mom, like, this is what I kind of felt that you instilled in me. Where did that come from? It was like, that was for me. She said, all things aside, you'll be rich if you're able to have a conversation with anyone on the planet. And that always stuck with me.
mm, mm, mm. That's very well said. I mean, I think your mother was onto something, and she's obviously still onto something. Communication is like a key in life, right? Marketing, advertising, selling, it all comes to communication, right? And these are the things that kind of make the world go around. If you know how to sell, then you really in some good standings right there. If you can't sell, then you can't really, you're not like bringing in that type of income, right, on certain things. So communication is clutch, and your mother is right. Like, if you're able to hold a conversation, an intellectual conversation to be exact, you have that ability. Now, you did talk about just in the beginning of this, like how you visit more of Mexico and not Puerto Rico. Could you tell us a little bit more about like what it was like living or being in that environment of being in Mexico, but then coming back to America? Like, what was the biggest transition between the two?
Yeah, that's a good thing to kind of develop here and kind of unpack, because a lot of my, we may get into talking about my time at NYU, which is where I spent my
Oh,
bachelor's.
you already know that's on the list.
Yeah, so in understanding, where I became kind of like this where I looked at things from a different angle was, my summers weren't spent, at summer camp, at sleepaway camp, which a lot of my classmates, a lot of the people that I ended up, becoming friends with in my later years, that's how they spent their summers, right? I was sent to Mexico in my summers, right, without my parents. So I thought that, to me, what was interesting was I'm going to get another set of parents, my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, and not only a different set of parents, a different set of parents looking out for me for a couple months in another country with different speeds of life, right? And I thought it was very interesting to see that, Mexico itself isn't a capitalistic run society, right? There's levels to what they have going on over there, and there's a greater attachment to home life and understanding the culture of how food brings everybody together. And like my family came from a really small town, about an hour and a half outside of Guadalajara. And my uncle, after he got a little bit successful in Mexico, bought a ranch, right? But I'm talking about a ranch. It's a ranch now. When he bought it, it was like a big piece of land with rocks and dirt and grass. And I saw him build that up. And the only thing that he cared about, right? We weren't, it wasn't like a resort. There wasn't any pools, right? It wasn't something glamorous, but he built this place for our family to have at all times. And that goes back to the legacy aspect of it. Another piece that always stuck with me is that he built something for his family to always have a place. And now, we ended up building a church on this ranch for the surrounding towns, a big church, and my dad's ashes are there. Our family who've passed away are all there. It's this kind of focal point for our family. And it's just these building blocks for me that now that I get to talk about them, it's just surprising how much that that got embedded in my DNA growing up, just
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, and knowing that, you know, the cars are really awesome, right? And, you know, everybody loves a good car, you know, and he had some nice cars, but he also, you know, did some other things for the family that I thought were going to resonate, you know, for years and centuries, and hopefully, you know, my kids.
Mm-hmm. Now, in this upbringing, that you had obviously, like you said, you were going back to Mexico during the summertime. You know, that's a couple months away from just being here in America. Like, what was some of the challenges, the upbringings that you had?
Yeah, I think coming back to the U.S. and going back and forth, the struggles really came because even now I feel I'm only. It's actually a good segue, and you'll hear from the way I speak and the way I think about things. I like going on tangents, and I don't finish some points and go to the others. It's just kind of how I
You good?
and it's funny. I end up getting back to where I needed to anyway. But one of the things I don't want to forget this, only because, you know, we were talking about it earlier. Not to discard your question, but I thought a good segue about what my mom said about being able to have a conversation with anyone is you know, a lot of times in the way the US and the way the America kind of tells their kids, you know, you got to know what you want to be early, right? And I think there's a big difference between what you want to be and what you're good at, right? And
That is true. I'm with you on that.
To me that's the you know, epiphany that you want to reach. It's there's a lot of things that you want to be, but you're only good at some things, and sometimes the things that you're good at aren't tangible, and that's what I really started to struggle with. And what I was struggling with was like I knew that like I wanted to be a lot of things, and a lot of things were glamorized, but at the end of the day, what I ended up being good at was just being able to talk to people and being able to command a room. And commanding a room isn't really a career, right? It's a skill set that you got to be able to embed. And I understood that at an early age. I was like, wow, what am I going to do with this weird skill set that I have? And you know, at my age now, I just turned 38 a couple months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Only in the last year or two have I really figured out what my skill set should be used for. So, sorry that I really didn't answer the question.
No, the challenge is obviously is finding out that's a challenge within itself. Like, what am I trying to be when I get older? And I know, obviously, like you said, your parents coming from a distant country, you know, it's very big to be like, look, you need to get a degree, you need to graduate, you need to get a job. You know, there's some type of pressure there, and you're looking at yourself and you're like, okay, what am I really good at? You know, you could easily be like, oh, I'm gonna be this, I'm gonna be this, I'm gonna be a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. But you're like, but I'm really good at communicating, right? But then how do you turn that into a career? And, you know, coming up where, you know, your parents don't know that much about the you know, all the various different career paths that you could have chosen at that time, you know, it's very hard to kind of pick that. And then that's why obviously schooling is very important, talking to teachers, professors to kind of get you there. And that was obviously a challenge within itself, but you realize something, that communication and what your mother had spoken about to you at a young age was going to be like the glue to it all. And then at that point, you know, growing up, who inspired you along the way to shape you to be the person that you are today?
Yeah, what's funny is the person that really inspired me the most is I had this high school teacher. He was our drama teacher and our English teacher, and he had gone to NYU, right? And was teaching us. And what was interesting is he had this really frenetic way of teaching. He just completely stepped outside of the box and was effective. And what that really instilled in me was, if you can figure out how to bend the rules and still get positive results, then those rules might not be the right rules. And I'm not speaking from a legality standpoint, right? I'm speaking about like the boundary standpoint, and something that that I really like to rest my head on, especially now in the corporate world and dealing with multi-million-dollar deals and the C-suite of major companies and agencies, is I don't really it doesn't really matter to me the ego part about being told that I was wrong. I love someone challenging me. I've told every single one of my bosses, please do not be scared to challenge me. Do not be scared to say, hey, that might not be the right way to do it, because from my high school teacher, I am going to look to break the boundaries of what I think can get the collective, whether it's a classroom, whether it's a team trying to, put together $1 million deal, whatever it is. I'm trying to get us to the goalpost from a different angle, because if you do everything the same way, the competition's also doing it the same way. And if you're able to show that you're doing it a different way and still get the same result, you might unlock some things from your clients or from your own team members. And that's just been kind of a mantra for me. And I always say it, I may break something on the way, but if I broke it on the way and then we end up fixing it to make a better product, a better process, whatever, then I still ended up doing my job.
Mm-hmm. So, Peter, I see that you went to one of the most iconic schools in America, NYU. How was it going there? And what was like the goal when you were attending there?
Yeah, so I thought, NYU, it's iconic. I think at the time that I went, which I was a freshman in 2002. At the time that I went, it was the #1 dream school globally when they did a survey. I forgot the company that ranks all the schools and does all that, but it was the #1 dream school. And for me personally, I wasn't looking at it that way, right? I was more excited about going to a college in New York City because my hallways were going to be the streets of New York, right? I wasn't going to be isolated. Now, halfway through, I was like, man, 1 year at a big school like Michigan or like LSU probably would have been a lot of fun, and I would have probably swapped 1 year just to get the experience. But I think it's almost indescribable to say what the experience is at NYU, because my dorms were on Washington Square Park. My quad was Washington Square Park. I crossed that every day my freshman year to go to class. And because the streets of New York were my hallways, it's so unpredictable, right? Every single day I had the opportunity to be a historic day because of being in New York City, right? It wasn't like I was on a campus and we were confined to the experience that was going to happen there. It gave you this almost uncomfortable chaos that for some people it energized, and for some people they left school pretty early. And I'm not saying that I dominated for all 4 years. There was ups and downs, right? Just the sheer expense of living in New York City, right? As a college kid, you have to learn money and time management like Picasso knew his paints, because it's just an unforgiving place to spit you out. People with millions of dollars, can't even navigate through the streets. So you got these influx of 19-year-olds coming in, 18, 19-year-olds just trying to understand the city. And because you don't have parents and supervision and you're just trying to make it on your own, you can go down some very dark paths. You can go down some very good paths. I always say, the bars, the bar life and the social life of college was so different in New York because we were interacting with adults, right? Like adults with careers and lives, and the most interesting people on the planet were just, at the corner coffee shop. And like I said, it would either enhance your experience or kind of take it into a bad place. And I think if I had to assess my general standing throughout those 4 years, is somehow I found a balance in the middle.
Mm-hmm. And you are right. New York is like the heartbeat, right? Manhattan, every day, every corner, there's always something new happening. You could obviously fall victim to those things and like lose track of like actually getting to class, doing your studies, because it's you have that access. You know what I'm saying? And I think one beautiful thing I really admired about growing up in New York was the fact that like, especially in Manhattan, you could be next to someone who's not well off to next to the billionaire, right? You could be next to the school teacher on the same corner about across the street, and then also next to the same person who woke up at 4 o'clock just to put out the hot dog and pretzel stand in the morning, right? It's all like, yeah, same time. And and if you're not like knowledgeable, you kind of will obviously miss some of those details that obviously could shape your career, your life, and like your future. Now, I know obviously at a young age, you had a background and you understood your background, you understood creative, you had a creative side. Like, how did you cultivate that to move into like the business side and like the media marketing?
Oh man, that's that's a question that has a bunch of different avenues. So we'll try to attack it at kind of the source where at NYU I was at the business school, the Stern School of Business, one of the better business schools in the country. Halfway through, I looked at myself and I was like, I don't think I'm built for finance. So what am I going to do now that I'm at one of the best finance schools in the country? I told myself, okay, you're gonna be uncomfortable in the materials that you're learning, but that doesn't mean that you can't open up some other parts, some other facets of your character and your intellectual side. And what I did was, my year was the first year that NYU has. The NYU has two sub schools. They have they have a bunch of sub schools, but the ones that I'm going to talk about are the business school, which is the Stern Business School, and then there's the Tisch School of the Arts, which is another famous school. Spike Lee, Ang Lee, heavy hitters went to the Tisch School, and I knew that entertainment media was going to be a place for me when I start understanding my skill set. Right, I didn't want to be buried in the numbers. So I wanted to be able to maybe use the numbers to get me to a place where my skill set would open up. And my year was the first year that they had a program that was a joint certificate added onto your degree, where I was able to take classes at Tisch and film producing, the economy of the entertainment business, and link that up with my degree at Stern to end up finishing with a special degree, a special certificate in entertainment media science, it was called. So just the fact that I was able to feel like I was not, I wasn't going to be happy in the business world, and I wasn't complacent. I did the work, right? You had to apply to this school, you had to submit transcripts, you had to do all these things, you had to get the classes, and now you're having classes in two separate buildings. But I think it was for the better, right? It really opened up my eyes to a whole nother a part of careers and life. And that was a turning point for me. It was in my junior year where I got into this program. And for the last 2 years before I graduated, I was taking classes in both schools, which I was the only person from the Stern side, from the business side, to do it. A lot of the Tisch school kids, they took advantage of that. I was I was the only one in my junior year and one of three in the senior year as part of that program.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, looking at congratulations on that. But I thought about it at the same time. Like looking back at your bio, I know you worked at WebMD, right? Yes. Could you tell us about that experience? Because obviously you did the marketing and stuff, the media marketing, but like the WebMD. Could you tell us a little bit about that experience and how did it get you to where you are now?
Yeah. So what's interesting about that is I started working at WebMD in 2016,
mm-hmm.
but I graduated college in 2006. So what happened in the decade between that? And what happened in the decade between that is I became an adult. And what that means is when I got out of NYU, I knew I wanted to work in the entertainment business, but I didn't really know how or what role. I was one of the only students to leave the Stern School of Business without a offer in the corporate business world, I just had no job. I had nothing coming out of NYU. And I bounced around, restaurant jobs, just trying to figure out, I still had to make money and live. And, what ended up happening was I decided to move to Los Angeles, California. And I told myself, you know what, a change of scenery might bring about a little bit more clarity. And I moved to Los Angeles in 2011. And in 2011 in Los Angeles, also bounced around a couple of odd jobs trying to figure it out until I landed an assistant's position on a major studio motion picture called The Lone Ranger with Johnny Depp and Armie Hammer. And it was just my first taste of the music of the movie world, and I was hooked. I was hooked on the magic side of it, but I was also hooked on the struggle physically and mentally of what working on sets and in production of movies would be. And just to take a quick 30-second kind of aside on this, I don't want to compare it exactly to the military training and boot camp because that's not a fair comparison. But what did happen was 4 a.m. call times.
Yeah, those call times. Ooh.
18-hour days in the desert. Being in the trenches figuratively with a bunch of other professionals doing the same thing, the camaraderie, really pushing my body to do that. I blinked and, 4 or 5 years had passed of me working from major movies to television shows, to major commercials, bringing myself up the line and getting better and better positions of pay and role. And at the end of the day, those 5 to 6 years in that game, like I said, let me know that my body could do a lot of the things and that my mind could do a lot of the things that would be deemed difficult. Like, day in, day out, the early call times, just the struggle and having it not be about money, but be about the work. And when I came out of there with the clarity, I told myself, maybe I should use my degree, right? And that schooling that I got 10 years ago and that skill set that I've been building up my whole life. And just like, I was looking through the new want ads, which is Indeed and LinkedIn, and I saw a couple of the old want ads, and I saw a couple of roles that I thought that I could fit in with based on a lot of my experience and my degree. And I went on a couple of interviews, and WebMD made a lot of sense. They gave me an offer, and that was in 2016. So what's interesting is there's a lot of ways to slice a career, right? For 10 years, I was a journeyman, almost like, in the world of sports, there's those players and athletes that go from team to team and from league to league, just trying to find their role, knowing that they have the skills. And as a journeyman, I finally made it to kind of like, I'm not saying that WebMD was the optimal, but I started working for him. For those not familiar with WebMD, it's that website online that you type a couple of your symptoms and it tells you that, you might have cancer. It's probably just an allergic reaction to something. But legally, we have to tell you that it could be cancer. We're just covering our backs. And I started working on the advertising side of the business. WebMD's a publisher. It's a media publisher. They put out content, and the way they put out content and stay alive is they get advertiser sales. It's not unlike the TV networks, right? TV network puts out a TV show. The only way that it puts out a TV show is from the advertisers paying for the commercials, right? So the same thing applies online. And I kind of got in that world, and I was there for 6 years. I was at WebMD for 6 years, and it was a really amazing experience. I met some friends for life. And yeah, you got it's enough rambling for me. Maybe a question for you could direct us back, get us back on track. But I'm getting us there.
No, I appreciate you breaking that down, because I think that's very important that the listeners know, like, it took years to get skill of yours to like actually come to like to be put to like the test. Like you said, you stepped into your arena, you always ask your bosses to challenge you. I think that's very important. I know sometimes with, certain individuals, they might not ask for that raise. They might not want to be put in those types of situations to ask to be like, look, push me because I want to be that good at what I'm doing. And that's how you got to, really test your skills, and like you said, those 4 a.m. wake up calls and that's 6, 7, 8 years of your life, and like you said, it changed you. It made you the person that you are today. And I know one of the things along the journey, something I take away from your story is that obviously you were doing all of this. You were growing up, you were becoming an adult, you were adulting, you were finding like your true purpose in life, right? Now, obviously being Latino, being half Puerto Rican, being half Mexican, you worked in corporate America for several years. Now, what do you think companies can do to help minorities feel comfortable?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting point to make because I think corporations and financial institutions, right? They're in a difficult place, right? They're in a difficult place because there needs to be more opportunity for minorities. There needs to be more opportunity just for the diversity that's in the U.S. and globally, right? But it's also hard because they can't come off being seen as the savior, right? It's the savior complex is tough. It almost makes it seem like I couldn't have got there without the help, right? I couldn't have, like, you needed to open this door for me. And it's a really tough line. I don't envy the positions of corporations because that they have the right intentions behind what they do. Mm-hmm. And you know what I'm saying? Like they have the right intentions, but any perceived slight or wrong move can be blown up, and it's all with the intention of doing the right thing, and it's just a really difficult space to maneuver. And the way I see it is, I think the transparency would really help a lot of things, in the sense of like, it might be okay to say that you don't really know how to create more opportunities, and that the minorities themselves should be the ones that can bring those ideas to the corporate. I'm going to take us on a little tangent, and we're just going to do it because I have a platform. I want to say something. What I didn't bring up is my dad was a New York City police officer for 20 years. My brother, New York City police officer for 20 years. And I see this comparison, like this mirror between, like, okay, you got corporations that like need to do things for their bottom line, right? But also need to open up opportunities. And you have policing and communities, right, that need to uphold the law, but in upholding the law, they still have to figure out ways to be inclusive. And to me, it comes from just the participation, right? It just doesn't feel like on both sides that there's an open dialogue between those that you're looking to give, opportunities to, because systematically, whether you believe it or not, there has been barriers to their entry and barriers to their opportunities. But like, if a policing a community is not going well, you should probably let the community tell you how they can better themselves to get to a point. You need to police it less. And on the corporation side, if you feel like you're not doing enough for the minorities and opportunities, you should ask your employees, have the transparency to say, what are we doing wrong? Because we're probably not doing it right. And if we are doing it right, we could probably do it better. And to me, that openness, that letting go of going, and again, it all comes back to kind of what I've been thinking about myself, is like, please tell me what I'm doing wrong. If I'm at a 7, how can I get to a 10? Because I'm at a 7 through my skills, but I need to be at a 10. So if you let me know how I get those 3 notches to 10, then what only matters is that I'm at a 10. To me, it's not a knock to me that I can only get to a 7 and I need help to get to a 10, because at a 10, people are going to like me probably. I'm going to make more money. Like, my life is going to be better. Those 3 notches don't hurt my ego. And I think all of that comes together.
Now, well said on that. Well said. I like how you dropping some serious gems today, and I appreciate that. And listeners, I hope you're diving into this. Now, Peter, I know being of Latino descent, I know sometimes the Latino community sometimes can be looked down and um, frowned down on, right? I want to know if there was any experiences while you were growing up in corporate America and trying to find your path. Did you experience anything that might have been insensitive to you at work, and like how did you handle that?
You know, I'm not gonna lie. Like I said, I skipped corporate America for about 10 years, right? And in those 10 years, major events happened. Me Too movement, right? Like the dawn of just like the Black Lives Matter movement. Like I skipped the corporate world for those 10 years. So when I came in 2016, it already felt that it was a little bit more inclusive and that there was a cushion and that there wasn't as much there just wasn't as much difficulty in me feeling like I was walking around like a Latino, Latinx, whatever we want to call it, and feels respectable. It didn't really feel that way for me, just like it really hadn't felt that way for me at NYU either, which was not it was diverse in the fact that it was global, but it wasn't so diverse that there was a huge I didn't feel like I had like an enclave or a safety net of Latinos in NYU itself. It was just pretty much, it was diverse as possible. So everybody felt unique and comfortable. And currently now where I work at Vice, I think one of the virtues of this place is it is so unique, and it fosters that uniqueness. And I'm just at the way we conduct our business, the content that we produce, which we can get into in a second. We're just reporting on things that nobody else really has the confidence or the wherewithal or even the advertisers to back up. Like we don't really. There's no real agenda. We're trying to find the news at its core, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And I think that permeates down into our organization, where individuality is encouraged, it's embraced. We're all so unique. I learn something new from my coworkers every day. So unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, I personally have never really felt that my background was an inhibitor in corporate America. I think more so, I would say more so the inhibitor that I have was kind of the pressure that I put on myself, knowing for years that, I had this really expensive degree that I wasn't using. And that's another thing, right? Like the first generation, if you're a first generation kid that went to college, your parents, all that matters to them is that sheepskin, right? That diploma. That means that they won, right? That, like they raised a good kid because they got a degree. And what I would say now is that pressure was daunting for a lot of years. Did I make the right decision? Should I have just followed the process and got a job? And at the end of the day, that 10-year gap was really the most crucial time in my life, because if I would have dove into the corporate world earlier, I don't think I would have had the tools to maintain myself and succeed.
Now, in the mix of what you were just saying right now, you did talk briefly about Vice Media, right? Yeah. And that's a well-known company, right? To all the listeners out there, right? And you talked a little bit about, some of the things that happen at Vice Media, like the things that Vice does directly. But what is, I know you do partnership over there. Can you tell us a little about your job, what it entails, and how does it feel to work for such a cool brand?
Yeah, so I'll give you the background on why I was really excited. Vice is my dream company. I had been a fan, as a New Yorker, and just where their brand was in about 2014, 2015, the type of content that they were putting out, it just felt so New York, right? It felt like it was New York's media company, right? It was New York's content production company. The stuff that was coming out of there, ASAP Rocky and his crew, Action Bronson, the food and culinary aspect of it. They were just doing the stories that were in between the stories, right? When you grow up with CNN and Fox News and MSNBC, right? You're getting such a prescriptive angle of news and what news is, right? And Vice came along at the right time, the rise of the internet, YouTube, street culture, food, music, and just kind of brought all the things that like this huge subset of the American youth was, we had all the same interests, from like really cool late night food to like what's going on in the rap game and clothing, and like it all kind of came together, and I was a huge fan. And I was like, in my head, if I'm ever gonna at least love what I do, working for that company would be amazing. And I just didn't know how I was gonna get there. And in getting there, I'm just happy we're still in the same place. And let's talk about my role. My role is in content partnership. So as I was saying before, right, a media company, has to have an influx of advertising revenue. That's the end. That's the gasoline to the car that fuels the engine, and it allows all that news, right? All the expenditure that we make on the news, that hard hitting news that we've done. We're in Ukraine, we're on the ground. We're speaking to our access is crazy. That's just one of the things that really, I wake up and I'm like, coming from Mexico, right? So we just did on Sunday night, we just had a Vice News special on Showtime where we talk about, the missing women in Mexico and how it's tied to the cartels and human trafficking. And our news reporter was on the phone with a cartel member. That access to me makes my unglamorous or non-glamorous part of it, where I'm working with agencies and brands and putting together campaigns and all and providing revenue. It's important because these brands want to get their, it doesn't change the game from television, right? Or any of the traditional media outlets, a magazine. You have a product, you want to sell the product, or you have a service, you need to get the eyeballs on it. And there's a certain demographic that Vice News brings, and I'm in that liaison role where I'm working with the brand and the agencies that represent them, and I'm working with our organization to put together a package that makes sense for both. So all that happens, and then the revenue that's generated is for all of this news, right? So it's just understanding where you are and how it makes you feel that makes the everyday really, really exciting to me, and happy that I work there.
And the fact that every day doesn't seem, it seems that your job, taking it back to this, I like how there's like a similarity when you talked about the experience at NYU, and you talked about like every day was different, like every corner had something. It seems that's the same thing at your company as well too, where like there's always something coming through the door. No day feels the same because of all the opportunities that you do have with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Again, it's that chaos, right? But not a violent chaos, just like stimulation, right?
Control chaos.
Yeah, control chaos. It fuels me, and somehow, some way, almost, what is it? It's 2022, right? So I grad, 16 years later, I find myself in a role at a company where I'm doing a little bit with the numbers and a little bit with the creativity. It all kind of just came back 16 years later. So that's the thing, right?
That's the journey right there. You gotta trust the process, and you gotta know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. You just gotta keep accepting what is put forth in front of you, and kind of finding a way to navigate through it, whether it be the good and the bad. And I think that all those experiences that you've gone through, whether it be at WebMD, right now, advice, your childhood, your upbringing, going back to Mexico every summer. I think a lot of those things obviously truly have helped molded you and shaped you to the person that you are today. And that's a wise thing, because sometimes, people go through things in life and they're like, oh, I just went through that, and they don't really reflect on it. They don't really think like, wait, hold up, that happened for a reason. All right, like, how do I make that make more sense? And how do I, keep on growing my skill level, my skill set? Nah, I'm good. I could sit right here and just keep on doing what I'm doing, but then you wouldn't be happy. Now, being a minority, I know a lot of times, especially on the show, I've talked to a lot of guests, a lot of the minorities and immigrants have like that side hustle, right? And they're passionate about, projects that they're working on, behind closed doors. Do you have one you can speak about?
I do. I have one I can speak about, yeah. Kind of back to, what do I think I'm good at? Right. And how could that turn into money? At the end of the day, money does matter in the sense of you got to live, you got to eat. So I told myself, is there something that I think I can do with all the skill sets, with all the connections that I've amassed in all the different industries? And what is there anything that can I fill a void? Is there an industry with a large amount of spending that has a void that I can fill? Because what I'm going to tell all the side hustlers out there is that two things matter: be the first and make sure it's good. If you're not the first, be the second. And then it doesn't matter if it's good. It's just got to be as good as the first, right? So in my mind, it's really finding the gaps, and where we've come out of the pandemic over the last couple of years is there has been a shift in the way people consume alcohol. We've done a lot of studies of it at a couple of the organizations that I worked at, and the difference is that the onus on partying until you're blacked out or really drunk, that has kind of subsided more into this refined palette of drinking. And one of the side hustles that I have is that I am developing with a couple partners a new ready-to-drink cocktail that will fill a void in a industry that had $2 billion in spending in 2021. I don't want to say much more about it yet.
Okay.
But what's important is I will talk about why I'm doing it.
Okay.
And why I'm doing it is there's not only a passion story that could come from my family upbringing that will just make it fun for me to do, but it's the business void. There's $2 billion being spent. There's a gap. We would be the first to market, so we get to create it. So if you can imagine $2 billion of ready-to-drink cocktails, and I want you to think about it. That's brands like Cutwater that does a canned margarita or canned Paloma or canned grapefruit drinks, just all the drinks that you're thinking about in general. There's a version of classic cocktails out there that is currently not on the shelves, and our team, our organization would be the first ones to bring it. And when you think about side hustles and making and creating an opportunity, you just hope to capture a percent of the market share, and a percent of $2 billion is a great way to start a business.
You already know. You better tap into that. You better tap in.
Stay tuned on that. Also, the other thing that I would say is, I'm gonna bring a Lil Wayne lyric into it.
Let's get that. Let's come on, drop them.
Move in silence like the G's in lasagna, okay? Move in silence and let the success.
Okay.
I've always, that's been one of the lines that I put in that little mind pocket. And I'm like, oh, I want to tell somebody that I'm doing something. No. Let me just move in silence.
Okay, Tucci, Lil Weezy right here, dropping them tracks on us. Yeah, no, I think that's they always say G's move in silence. I know Nipsey Hussle was very big on that.
Yeah.
You know, he's like very infamous for influencing, you know, the hip hop community at large, especially after his passing, you know, rest in peace to Nips. But he had that mindset where he was like, look, guys, like we got to stop just talking. We got to be more about action and letting our work shine and inspire people in the many years to come. And I feel like what you're on right now, what you're working on, obviously you just dropped a little bit of it, but you know, from what I'm hearing, it definitely sounds like something's going to be blowing up relatively soon. So congratulations on that. I know that also comes from like the many years that you've been growing up to being into this individual that you are. Like, you would have never reached this level where you're able to do something like this if you didn't go through those experiences. Those experiences and that upbringing can kind of change and molded you to the individual that you are, to make you think the way you think. And like you mentioned too in the earlier session of the interview, you mentioned about, I always want my bosses to challenge me. And I feel like you do a wonderful job of challenging yourself to always want more for yourself. And not just like, it's not like you're like, you never be happy with what you have. I feel like you definitely are, but you know that you have a lot more potential in you. And I want to kind of leave it over this last question. Like, what advice would you give to a young child who's just moved from Mexico or even Puerto Rico, for example, and here's your interview and wants to follow in the same career path?
Yeah, I think what I would tell them is I wouldn't even give them advice. I would tell them what the proudest moment of my career was. And the proudest moment of my career had nothing to do with my actual career. In 2016, I'm not gonna lie, I was not the first choice. A ex New York Knicks basketball player had some scheduling conflicts, and he was not able to be the commencement speaker at a graduation, at a grammar school graduation, elementary school graduation in Flushing, Queens, New York. And one of the teachers there, who I had a professional relationship from working with the NBA and one of my prior organizations, knew that I could command a room and was like, hey, we're in a bind. If you had to give a speech to 500 people in a New York City school auditorium tomorrow, could you do it? Said, absolutely. And what I would tell that kid coming from whatever country and would want advice and go to his career, I had no idea what I was going to say. But that was a major opportunity for me to find out if I really could command a room and I wasn't just BSing myself. That was the opportunity. If I'm telling myself that I could do it, right? You cannot shy away when somebody gives you an opportunity, no matter how terrified you are. And the next day, 24 hours later, there I was standing on a stage speaking to 500 strangers, parents of kids, and giving them advice on what their next phase of life was going to be. And maybe you'll have to tune into an episode 2 to see how I will tell you that I would tell that kid, say yes. It'll only tell you if you can do it or not.
That's true. And I know sometimes people might be like, well, I'm afraid to fail, but if you don't move, then you never know if you can win. Right?
Stand-up comedians will never know if they're funny or not, if they don't stand up on that stage.
That is correct. Right. So wow, man. You just dropped some serious stuff. And I think at the end of this interview, I think you dropped the mic, Peter. So I appreciate you this evening, giving us a lot of this insight. And I want to bring it back to what your mother said. If you could have that conversation, and I think it was a privilege and an honor to have this conversation with you this evening, and just being able to kind of share in this conversation about your life, your legacy that you're building right now, and your future endeavors. All the best. Again, Pete, I want to thank you again so much for just being on the show today, and it's really just sharing this valuable information with our guests.
Thank you so much. This is a great platform. I learned a little bit more about myself during this as well. So I think everybody wins here.
Blessings to the listeners. If you want to hear more inspirational stories like Peter, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect and follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcast. Again, Peter, thank you again for joining us on the show.
Thanks, Paul.